The canoe kept us alive. They can go up the rapids or come down the rapids, come back with venison, berries, everything. They have larger canoes where they can spread it all around. The canoe was their true livelihood.
They used the canoe to carry cedar logs from one point to the other. They used cedar logs for their canoes for the transport of baskets of berries or roots or whatever it was they needed to bring across to the other side to their families that were living there when they used to have get-togethers and giveaways. And they used to have these things all around the different inlets of the lake. St. Joe was another place, and where Hayburn Park is today, Chatqele, all of the different areas that our people, our families, all lived together, and that's how they shared the different entities. They would even hunt deer and carry the deer meat across to the families on the other side of the lake.
This particular place is called Nichum. It means a place of herding. There were special hunters that knew the animals. They knew the trails. They drive the deer over into the river. And when they would jump the river, they had different sizes of canoes. And they had elites, sharpshooters. The horses and the canoe worked together better because the horses, they were able to go out on the prairie, be able to load up more berries, roots, and whatever, hunting. But the canoes always come back to the lake, distribute everything.
To me, when the canoe is coming back to the lake, it's coming back to its place of ownership, to Lake Coeur where I belong. It's on our waters. We should prepare ourselves to protect it always for the environment.
And the lake really was a habitat for important foods for the tribe, in particular water potatoes. Water potatoes were really, really special to the tribe and still remain special to the tribe today.
When it gets to be winter, they can come down the lake, they can survive the winter. The lake always give them some to live on. There are places around Coeur Lane, up at around Fernand Lake. That was their main headquarters now. That's where all the sub-chiefs, when there's something comes up, they go there for the council.
That was their way to the mountains. That was their way to the buffalo. That was their way to the deer, and their way to the plants, etc. It was the heart of them. And they really loved that lake, and they had a special connection to it, not even physically but spiritually.
Their original territory, they held sovereign and dominion over 4 million acres, up to Lake Pend Oreille, down to Nez Perce country on the North Fork of the Clearwater, east across the Bitterroots into Montana, near Missoula, and to the west of Spokane, down near Latah Creek. That was their Aboriginal territory before European contact. Catholic missionaries and the trappers started coming in here in the 1850s. 1858, 59, the tribe was starting to get affected by this westward movement, principally through disease. But more and more people were coming in here. A military officer by the name of Colonel Steptoe was coming through their land with a contingent of cavalry. And the Coeur d'Alenes figured he was coming to take their land from them. So they engaged in an all-out battle with him in what's called the Battle of Steptoe Butte. And they defeated his military contingent. So the United States, in an attempt to teach the tribe a lesson, as they put it, sent a much larger contingent of cavalry with a lot more cannons and a lot more firepower. He was burning villages, burning their stored crops. So they fought all the way up the river, and they ultimately ceased hostilities and negotiated a treaty of peace between the Coeur d'Alene and the United States. The United States was very well aware the tribe would do whatever it took to defend their land. And the United States never forgot that. In 1867, the United States government, without giving the tribe any notice, created a reservation out of the tribe's Aboriginal territory.
When they created the first reservation, they created it without Coeur d'Alene Lake, and the tribe instantly, even though we've been very friendly and cooperative and wanting to be, get along with our neighbors and with the United States government, we immediately and instantly rejected that initial reservation because it didn't include Coeur d'Alene Lake, and so we fought to have it included. We always believed that it was included.
So they petitioned the United States. They send in 2 petitions, 1870, 1871, asking the United States to redraw their boundary of their reservation or create a new reservation, which included Lake Coeur d'Alene and their rivers, the St. Joe and the Coeur d'Alene River. I'm not aware of any other tribe that rejected their reservation, where the United States came in and renegotiated a larger reservation at the wishes of the tribe. So they did come in here for several days and negotiated with the Chief Seltice and other leaders of the tribe and came to an agreement to redraw the boundary in what is now called the 1873 agreement. More and more mining is occurring. And so there's all kinds of incursions into their territory within their reservation, as well as their Aboriginal territory, which is still all intact. So the United States sends out a contingent to negotiate for the release of their Aboriginal territory. The tribe was in agreement with that. That was kind of the bargain in 1873. So they came up with the 1887 agreement, which would cede all of their Aboriginal territory. And the words in the agreement basically say, this will be the permanent home of the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and the United States and the citizens of the United States will do nothing to impair or affect in any way these lands without the tribe's consent. So that 1887 agreement sits there unratified because there's so much pressure from the mining industry and miners and so much encroachment going on.
Back in the day, it was all about greed, it was all about extraction, it was all about mining for precious metals. At the time, it was silver.
They're having trouble getting up into the mining territory, up into the Silver Valley, because of the mountainous territory. The only access really is up the waterways. The United States wants to renegotiate. So what they're wanting here is to remove this from the reservation and gain access to the waterways so they can move materials up into the mining territories. There was no agreement on price for the acreage. And so the United States, in effect, declared the deal struck, went back to Washington, D.C., and ultimately paid the tribe $2.50 an acre for all of the uplands. And they never compensated the tribe a nickel for any of the waterways. The Harrison cession was negotiated with the Coeur d'Alenes. And the way that started was a few, one family or a few non-Indian people situated right at what is now the town of Harrison, and they had asked the tribe for permission to fish there. And so the tribe said that was fine. Well, more and more people started moving in there. There was 200-300 people pretty soon. And they started petitioning Congress and the United States to cede them out of the reservation, saying that there was a mistake made in the survey of the reservation. Harrison should never have been included, which was false. So they send a contingent out here to negotiate with the tribe. The tribe agrees, we'll sell it for $15,000. If those people want to behave that way, we don't want them in the reservation to begin with. So they ceded a 1-mile strip across the northern portion of the reservation, which became the city of Harrison. But they did it with tribal consent. They did not unilaterally force it onto the tribe. At the same time, the state of Idaho is seeking statehood. It wasn't the state of Idaho at the time, it was a territory. So the state of Idaho is granted statehood, and several months after that, the agreements with the tribe are ratified by Congress. So technically, Idaho became a state prior to these agreements being ratified. 1906, 1907, the United States is giving the tribe notice that they're going to come in and allot their reservation. And so despite this agreement we have with you, Coeur d'Alene's, where we will never impair or affect your land, we are going to divide your reservation up into lots of 160-acre parcels, and each member of the tribe will be given 160 acres. And then the balance of the land that's left, we're going to declare surplus and open all that up for homesteading. So the tribe fought against that, and the United States basically told them in writing as well as verbally, if you persist, we will force it on you. The lands off the reservation were going for $20, $30, $40 an acre. The tribe could not secure anything above $1.25 an acre. And it went to the first person that staked the claim. They tried to pick their allotments near the waterways. And they were driven off of that and said, you're not allowed to select land near the waterways. So they located all the tribal members on the west side of the reservation in the uplands away from the water. So in reaction to that, the tribe, they went to Congress, to Senator Hayburn, and asked him to create a national park in this area south of basically where the St. Joe River dumps into Lake Coeur d'Alene. It's sitting in Congress and not going anywhere, but ultimately it gets converted from a national federal park on an Indian reservation to a state park, and it becomes Idaho's first state park because it's ratified by Congress. But there's 3 lakes within this boundary of Hayburn State Park, and the tribe is never compensated for that. Mining is exploding in the Silver Valley, and encroachment into the tribe's territory is rapidly increasing. And so there's more and more pressure on the tribe and its lands and resources. And the mining in the upper valley is starting to contaminate the rivers and the lake in major ways. I mean, it's like the money started to take over the mining from like 1910, when the allotments were completed, up to the late 60s. The tribe kind of went dark. The state moved in and declared they owned Lake Coeur d'Alene, declared they owned the rivers. Of course, Wash and Water Power was happy with that because that way they didn't have to deal with the tribe. And the tribe had no financial means to fight that. So it was a devastating time for them.
Over the decades, we used to visit Coeur d'Alene River on a regular basis, gathering water potatoes, swimming in the rivers, and there was a day and a time when our people noticed that the river turned white. The way Felix tells the story, he always says, my uncle went up there and he saw that the river turned white, and from that point on, he always used to say, oh, they're trying to turn us into white people.
The amount of contamination, there were like 500 plus mines operating in its heyday in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And they really had no place to pile the contamination, the waste rock that had all this heavy metal in it. So they dumped it in the river.
We became aware of the pollutants that were entering the lake because of the mining activities that had been going on. And of course, we were worried about the effect of native plants and the fish on our peoples.
In walking around the marshes, they would hear the death cries of the wild animals and find the carcasses. And they concluded there was something wrong with the water. We didn't have any data or statistics to go on. All we had were the 5 senses.
And we did have a tribe member more recently go up and dig water potatoes, but ended up getting sick with a little bit of lead poisoning.
This is one of the most polluted drainages in the entire basin. A lot of zinc, cadmium, lead, mercury are pouring out of this creek 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and it all eventually winds up in the South Fork, moving down into the Coeur d'Alene River, into Lake Coeur d'Alene. It's kind of tucked away in the upper drainage where probably most people in Coeur d'Alene have no idea that this is even existing up here.
I remember just herding to the core, going up and seeing the mining tailings piles and looking at what had happened.
A lot of that heavy metal is tied up in the bottom of the lake, in the sediment, and the last thing we want is for that to be released. And when you get situations where there's very low oxygen and stratified temperatures in the lake, you run the risk of it turning over and releasing all those metals into the water.
It's going to be hard for our fish peoples, the animals that live around it, and the entire ecosystem in itself. Everything's connected, as we say, so it's all impacted.
Coeur d'Alene is built on an area of tourism, and you don't want to say, oh, our lake is sick and scared. We understand that. We're in the business as well too, and so but we also have an obligation to our people and to the people of everybody to help heal the lake.
There was so much contamination out there that it stifled everybody's willingness to do something about it. People would look at it and say, what do you do? There's so much of it, so many places, so in such quantities, there's no way it can be cleaned up.
Right now, our society, some things are more important than our survival. And when you think about survival, we need clean water, but we pollute it. We need clean air, but we pollute it. We need organic foods from the earth, and yet we put all these chemicals in it. It's almost like we have no more common sense. When you put these waters and these tributaries and the surrounding fauna in balance, that's a good reflection upon us. That means we're going in a good direction. And to me, that's about healing, and that's about making a better place, not just for us, our children, our grandchildren, but many, many generations later.
Ownership aside, we've always believed, and I hold this true to my core too, that we have a spiritual connection to this land. And so when I see it, and regardless of who owns it, and I see that it's hurt, it really made me sad. And it made me realize all at once how important the tribe's role in our community is, because we're one of the small voices, or one of the only voices, I should say, for water quality in the lake. And we're certainly the leaders, and we have to make sure we fulfill that role. We're going to always be here. We've always been here. We have to make sure we're taking care of that lake.
It's a 100-plus-year-old case for us. When the companies themselves came in and started extracting the resources and then dumping their tailings into our water system, that's gone on for decades. And then as we watched it pollute our waterways and our entire ecosystem, that's when the tribal peoples decided to take action, because neither the state nor the federal government were stepping in.
Well, the mining industry at the time said, well, this basin has been studied to death. There really was no reliable information on how much contamination was out there, what the nature and scope of it was. Most of it was information saying everything's going to be okay, Mother Nature will take care of it. And it was evident it wasn't happening. And so we filed notices to the mining companies in 1990, and then notices to the state of Idaho that we wanted to negotiate cleanup with the mining companies and the railroad, and ownership and quiet title to the navigable waters within the reservation. So we entered into negotiation with the state of Idaho and the Attorney General's office for like 7 months, and then ultimately their land board, which is the governor, the Attorney General, Secretary of State, voted to not negotiate any further. So we got nowhere on the negotiation proposition. So the tribe said, then let's file the lawsuits. And so in 91, within 30 days of one another, we filed the lake case against the state of Idaho in federal court, and the cleanup case against the mining industry and the railroad in federal court. So that became the big challenge, was to develop that scientific data as well as the historic data, as both cases were moving concurrently.
We think that if we can gain control of the waters, that we can control how that water is going to be utilized.
We knew we were up against powerful, well-heeled interests, and we didn't have much resource. The tribe was so committed to doing it.
We had some, great lawyers, Ray Givens, like Ray Givens, Howard Funke, Sand Work. Those three gentlemen are true warriors.
It was a very scientifically based lawsuit, collecting a lot of data to be able to prove injury to a vast amount of natural resources, ultimately to receive funds or damages to then begin cleaning up the problem.
So this is a color-coded map of the lead contamination sitting in the river systems and in the lake. Of course, the red being the heaviest amount of contamination. On this map, it's 1,800 parts per million or higher is the orange, and 200 is the allowable safe level of lead in soil. So you can see the extent of the contamination. We ultimately had to take Hecla and the Sarco to trial. It was like a 6-month-long trial.
They attacked, of course, and then tried to wine and dine us and meet with us. Offered us huge settlements to to not go to court. I was in D.C. and brought up this office. I don't know which mine it was. Maybe all of them got together, but to meet with this person who just made me a huge offer to sell out, and did something that morally I wouldn't do, and I couldn't do it. But I probably could have walked away a pretty rich man if I'd have put my signature down on the paper, but I didn't.
And as we're developing all this data and information and the nature and extent of the contamination, and the United States had drawn that 3-by-7 square mile area, 21 square mile area called the box, as the extent of their responsibility under CERCLA. We kept after them, look at this contamination. The scope of it is enormous and you cannot turn your back on it. And so finally, after a meeting with the Chief Deputy Attorney General, she agreed that they would file a lawsuit and join with the tribe in seeking funding for remediation of the contamination. So the United States came into the case 3-4 years later in '94. Suddenly we had the resources we really needed to develop that foundational information was sufficient to get them to change their position. It was nose to the grindstone for a decade. And in addition, we have the lake case going on simultaneous. They wanted to fight for the lake and fight to clean this contamination.
Felix has always told us how, from his father and the generations before that, how the Coeur d'Alene tribe never gave up ownership of the Coeur d'Alene Lake through all the negotiations of the reservation boundaries. In fact, it's something that's always been a sore spot for the tribe once we discovered that the state of Idaho was acting and managing as owners of the lake.
We interviewed and talked to as many elders as we could at that time to establish the ownership of the lake that the tribe felt. And indeed, they felt that ownership was never given up, even during the times that we were moved from this area back, that the lake was always the center of the tribe, and that in no way that they, in their minds, that the tribe, that they could conceive of the tribe ever giving up that portion of the lake, which was so near and dear to them.
The tribe's position is, we didn't have an agreement on price. You didn't pay us for the submerged lands. And what we were bargaining for was to give you access, not to sell you the lake and the rivers, so that everybody could use them, but we still owned them. The tribe's lawsuit that we filed claimed ownership of the entire lake, all the way to Coeur d'Alene, and all of the Coeur d'Alene River to Cataldo. And the state filed a motion to dismiss the case in front of the federal judge, Judge Ryan. He agreed with the state and said the state is immune from suit by the tribe because sovereigns, the United States, states, and tribes, being sovereign governments, are immune from suit. The Ninth Circuit said, we disagree with you, Judge Ryan. We think there's a good basis for the tribe's lawsuit against the state. We think they deserve their day in court. Supreme Court rules 5-4 that tribe's lawsuit against the state cannot withstand their sovereign immunity. They are immune under the 11th Amendment to the Constitution, and therefore you cannot sue them in federal court. That leaves two options. One is we could bring it into state court. We do not want to bring it into state court. That's a sure loser. We'd be asking the state to rule against itself, which they wouldn't do. So we won't submit to state court jurisdiction. The tribe has immunity from a state court. The other court that would have jurisdiction would be the tribal court. And of course, the state won't surrender its immunity to go into tribal court for the same reasons we wouldn't surrender our immunity to go into a state court. So we asked the United States, as the tribe's trustee, with a federal responsibility to protect tribal interests, to come in and file suit against the state in their own behalf. The United States is not subject to the argument of sovereign immunity. The United States can sue states. In '94, after significant discussions with the United States, the Attorney General decided they would, in fact, file a lawsuit on the tribe's behalf for ownership of the lake and the St. Joe River within the current boundary of the reservation. They said, in 1889, we bought this from you, so that's out of the reservation. We're not going to claim that in this lawsuit against the state of Idaho. We're only going to claim what's inside this boundary, which is this part of the lake and the St. Joe River. Because if we were to claim all of the lake, we would be in effect admitting that we stole it from you. And we can't do that. So this has never been decided in any court, because we couldn't get it in our case. 5-4 we lost. Then in the federal tribal case, it was limited, so it only addressed this portion. So the tribe has a continuing claim to this part of the lake and these waters. The federal court in '98 held that the tribe in the United States had proven there was contamination. That contamination had created injury. Asarco contributed this much and Hecla contributed this much percentage-wise. And so they are liable for the contamination and the injury.
In a state that is supportive of mining, it's very difficult at the end of the day to receive monies from these corporations through a damaged lawsuit. We had won in our liability phase of the trial. Hecla was deemed liable for the pollution, and we were about to go into the damage phase to say how much should they pay. At the time that we were about to move into the damage phase of the trial, Hecla came to the table to talk about settlement. And in the end, we quite frankly settled for pennies on the dollar of what they made profit-wise.
We plan on being good neighbors. We want to be good stewards of the land. Just look at everything we do. When we harvest our timber, we don't do it to hurt the land, to hurt Mother Earth. We do it to take care of Mother Earth. When we harvest, we take the dead and dying and the sick. We don't take it for profit. We use the dollars that we get off it for our people, but we don't clear cut or damage in any way. Well, same way with the lake. You know, it's there, and when it's healthy, it provides jobs, provides recreation, provides spiritual contact for those people that would look at it from that aspect. Provides food, nutrition from the lake, so all the aspects is there. It was just right to go after that lake and to have ownership of it.
And for several years, there was a pretty big court battle, a lot of testimony, some decisions, some appeals to those decisions. And then finally in 2001, the Supreme Court came back with their decision.
In trial over the southern portion, the federal district court judge, now a new judge, not Judge Ryan, it's Judge Lodge. He decides after a 2-week trial and a very lengthy, well-written, extremely well-documented opinion, decides that the tribe does in fact own the southern portion of the lake and the St. Joe River to its boundaries, that the United States fully intended on agreeing to that in 1873 and 1889. So even though the agreements with the tribe did not get authorized until after Idaho became a state, that would be creating a fraud on the tribe. Just because Idaho became a state in a certain period, a certain day in 1891, and the tribe's agreements got ratified shortly after that, doesn't change the intent. They said the tribe's entitled to exclusive use and possession and quiet enjoyment of Lake Coeur d'Alene and the St. Joe River within the reservation, and the state of Idaho is enjoined from interfering with that in any way.
It's actually one of the 5 top cases that took precedent in the Supreme Court to win a natural resource case. It's created a proud point of history for us.
It was just the most heartfelt happiness or victory that we could have as Native people, as Indian people, the Coeur d'Alene tribe, the Siskiyik people. In our minds, it was always a territory that was given to us when we were created. And so it was just a way of acknowledging in the legal area.
A lot of those old people, they shed tears, you know, they cried, and walking away from the lake. And you know, they moved down to the prairies and the Palouse, but their heart was always here, you know.
And I'm really lucky because when I was just right out of college, I took a job in Washington, D.C., and I worked for National Congress of American Indians, which is a nonprofit, and we lobby on the Hill for tribal issues. Ernie invited me over to the Supreme Court to listen to the oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court, and that was to be there, to experience that in my lifetime. I'll remember that to the day I die. It was powerful.
The federal government, you know, held true to their trust responsibility and empowered us to be able to come in and be with them to take the lake case to court for at least the southern 1/3, where they wouldn't take that step necessary to say, oh yeah, we'll do it for the entire lake, but they did it at least for the 1/3, which is important, and we just have to continue to figure out what we're going to do for the northern 2/3, and as well as Hayburn State Park too.
The benefit that we have now to enable ourselves to bring our own awareness back to this lake and to get that healing back, you know, is very good.
It's there for us to protect, and it's there for everyone that lives around us to use, and to use in a good way.
The spiritual connection that the tribe has with the lake is so important. It's the reason why we do what we do. We're the leader, but there's a reason why we do that. There's a reason why we step forward. And it's because of this emotional, spiritual connection that the tribe and our members have with the lake. And people should know that.
We knew it was righteous. It was the heart and the soul of our people, and there wasn't any other route to take. You know, the love of the lake was there. That was our home.
The water itself still needs to be cleaned, and that will take many more years to do so.
It's a constant battle, you know. You're not going to clean it up overnight.
As Henry Sijon, one of dear elders who's passed on, said, it took 100 years to pollute this basin. It's going to take 100 years to clean up this basin. Truly, it's going to take billions and billions of dollars to clean up this mess. One day, EPA is going to come up here to Canyon Creek and begin their remedial process. They will more than likely knock down the structures you see, and how they're going to deal with the contaminated water that is running right past us here, I have no idea. Their game plan right now is to basically plumb all of this water down into lower Silver Valley around Kellogg and put that water into the central treatment plant there to strip the zinc out of the water and other metals.
Work together with these agencies and work together with state, work together with different leaders in the community. I'd rather us to be like this instead of like this.
We certainly want to start working in protecting that lake. If there's work to do out there, then let's do it. Let's, you know, we're messing around with little pockets here and there. Let's attack that lake and start working on it.
The main thing for now is to raise awareness and basically to bring the community in and get everybody involved.
At this point, it's not about pointing fingers, but I think it's about really changing a mindset and a heart and a soul and a feeling about what we want to do and what is our legacy that we want to leave for our children.
But we do see life coming back. We do see life, we do see fish coming back into the upper streams. And so we're really excited about that. I'm excited about that for my kids to see. Because when I was a kid, I remember fishing in some of those streams as a kid. And then there was a time where you couldn't fish. And so now that to see our Natural Resource Department, to see our fisheries people get in there and really help that and fix that, so you can see change. You know, it wasn't about a land grab. This was about what was right.
My brother Quan and I, we are just young warriors, young people who've been handed off those ambassadorship pieces, and so it's our responsibility now to be good stewards, and soon we'll be handing it off to our children. As you see here, we'll be handing that off to them, because as our grandfather Felix will remind us, that our greatest contract with anyone and anything in this world is with Mother Earth first and foremost. We're owning it so that we're making sure that it's taken care of, and not to be selfish either, but taking care of it for the benefit of all people, whether we're tribal members or non-tribal members. To me, this is a homecoming. This is a good place. It feels good to be reconnected back to where we've lived since time immemorial. Just the fact that we're reconnecting in our own cultural way, being able to finally reclaim this land and call it home once again, and to be part of it the way we once were in this transportational system where we had our canoes out and transporting ourselves from one part of the community to another. For me, it's a blessing in itself, because I get to enjoy this time in our life with my own children. My legacy that I get to see now reconnect with this land and call home once again.
The lake is such a valuable commodity to the whole area. Our people can't afford these beautiful homes around the lake and have access and enjoy that. So what our tribal council did is we bought some properties along Lake Coeur d'Alene. We bought an old camp from Camp Larson from Washington State University, and we turned that into a beach area access for our tribal members, so they can have access to this beautiful gem that we call Coeur d'Alene Lake. And to see the kids smile when they jump in the water is awesome.
One of the pleasing things, I see some of my little younger ones. Good to know what a canoe looks like and the meaning.
When we launched from Benoit Lake, there was an energy there. There was a certain energy there amongst the old folks, the leaders, the children, and we all gathered and we had our prayer, we had our blessing, and they launched off. And my son was in there and he launched off, and boy, you know, I told him over and over, I said, son, I was so proud of you going on that lake and doing that. And you look down 20, 30, 40 years, that's gonna be a historic moment, you know. And then when they got to Coeur d'Alene and I seen all those boats coming in, it was the same feeling. It was like, welcome back home, you know. And I felt like the lake was happy. That was that pride that I think people were feeling. Even the lake seemed happy to us. And so we wanted to give our appreciation, and we gave thanks to the lake. And we sang songs and we danced on that traditional part again for the first time in, you know, many years. And so right there, boy, it was really something.
I requested to our Creator to join us, have our ancestors be here with us.
Yeah, to me it's a spiritual healing. You know, we've gone through, again, so much with the boarding schools, with termination era relocating of our people into the broader community of the U.S. Now it's just time for us to get back to ourselves, and as Grandpa Felix would say, you know, connecting back to our land and reinvigorating that spiritual connection that we've always had. And for us as a people, it's a way to put ourselves back together and to realign with Mother Earth and be whole again.
Just the friendliness, the getting together of all of our families, not just our family, but the other 5 families that were all there every night, every evening to work on the canoes on Saturdays. I mean, we had to go out and cut down our own maple and the cedar that we had to shape, and so it was just a lot of fun just being there together, and our sisters would cook meals for us, breakfast and dinner, so it was just a lot of fun.
And I know for me, you know, because our program, the Chesed, we were the ones that had to go out and find somebody who knew how to make a canoe, because we didn't have, we've lost that. We had lost that because they removed us from the lake. When we did the very first blessing down at Camp Larson, and our young people, they, you know, sang an honor song, and when that canoe touched the water, I felt our ancestors. I felt them welcoming us home, and it was the most beautiful feeling for me to be a witness on the banks of our water. I was proud that day to be Shishitchuamsh. I was proud of who I was, and even when we made our own canoe, and you know, we tied it and we stripped the wood, and North Star was there, and my mom and dad, you both were there, and you know, our whole family helped build that canoe. And when Dad started singing that song, and I just felt it. I felt the strength of our people through the songs and through the language and through who we are as Shishitchuamsh. The emotion was just so intense, and you know, it was the most beautiful feeling that day to be able to be a part of bringing back and awakening that warrior spirit.
The canoe has come back to life. It's bringing us all back to life. We're here together. I always said, the eagle belongs up there. He knows what's going on all over. But the canoe, he's the boss of the lake. And that's what our canoe is going to represent from now on.
It feels like we've been lost for a long time as Indian people, and we're now finding the roots of our own people so that we can feel proud and feel that pride within us.
That is what's going to heal our people, is going back to the water. Like you've always taught us, the water is our strength. The water cleanses our hearts and our minds and our spirits.
Let's bring back some of these canoes that we utilize on this lake. Let's relearn how to be on the lake in a traditional way. Let's learn the language associated with being on the lake. Let's do that. And let's bring all our children. Let's create programs around it. Let's bring them down to the lake. Let's utilize it even more. And in that sense, you know, for me, when I come to the lake, it represents health.
You want to say it's over, but it's not. I mean, we never did give up our fight for the northern part of the lake. You know, that's still contested. And then there's Hayburn State Park within the reservation. You know, we still believe those are contested waters. We still believe that belongs to us. But you know, there's a time and place for everything, and you know, we'll get there when it's right.
Our people, the Siskiyou people, we have the ability to once again stand proud of who we are.
I think about my elders, what that lake meant to them. I'm part of it. Always been part of it.